All right, I want to say good morning again. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to our class PJ171 CTL7009 anti-discriminatory education. This is one of our special classes. It is our community class. And for those who know what I've been doing for a while in my work here at University of Toronto, OISE, is that in every course that I teach, I try my best to include 2 classes for community class. And that's something we are learning as we talk about decolonization. That is something we are learning as we talk about decolonization, something we are learning as we talk about anti-discriminatory education, something we are learning as we talk about how do we grow in community. It is that we cannot grow in community without including community. And I want to tell you, genuinely, this is a mistake we have been making in equity work, in anti-discriminatory work, in anti-colonial work. We have been excluding community from our work. And that's something I want us to make sure we do, and we do well. And so this morning, this class belongs to the home of CTL7009, which is anti-discriminatory. Our group, our main group is PJ171. We also have Dr. Bruford, and her group is here with us, which we are honored to have you, Dr. Bruford. Good morning, Dr. Bruford. Happy to have you and your peeps here with me. And so we're going to get into, we also have community members outside of our classes. And I see you, community. I see you. Give me a thumbs up if you are not an OISE member, an OISE student, but you're a community member. I see you. I see Colleen. I know a couple faces and names. I see a couple of my people all over community. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for being a part of this. There's going to be time to engage. So at this time, I'm going to turn over the rest of this class, the rest of this conversation to our guest speaker today, Dr. Ranisha Blaché, and someone I remember I met Dr. Blaché at AERA, which is the American Education Research Association, way back then. And she was presenting, and I was just, who is she? Who is she? Who is she? All that blackness just coming through, all that goodness, all that love. I want to make that very clear. I just got chills just saying all that love I heard come out of you, Dr. Blaché, for literature, for children, for the books, for the stories, for the offerings, for just making sure as a teacher you show for all our students. The number of time you use the word love and care in that presentation, I go, I got to know her. I have to know who she is, because that's what I believe. Teaching for 25 years, 25 Septembers. That time it may be 16 or 17 Septembers, but it was a couple of years ago, and I was like, this is the kind of teaching that I stand firm in. Teaching that is beyond content, because I always say content is 60%. The other 40% is the care, the love, the kindness that you show our students so they can enjoy your class and they want to be a part of your class. And so I want to turn over, she's going to introduce herself, because she's going to pair that into the work that she does, so you understand that as an educator, your work is bigger than the classroom walls. Your influence is bigger than the time that the period starts and the subject starts. And anti-discrim is about who you are. From you walk in, it's how you embody the work. So Dr. Blaché, thank you. It's over to you.
Well, good morning. This is morning for me. I know we're in different time zones. I am located in Goodyear, Arizona, which is right next to Phoenix. And I literally moved here because it was 2020 and I needed it to be a good year. Hello. I am honored to have this time with you guys this morning. So we're going to be doing some interactive conversation. This is not just a lecture at all. If you have your pens and pads with you, please have them handy. We will be doing some writing. There will be some questions and some opportunities to interact throughout the opportunity before we get to the end. And I'm going to ask that you guys do chime in to write down your questions and feel free to raise your hand at any given moment. This is an interactive conversation. I'm actually sitting at my kitchen table. So this is one of those kitchen table talks. This is a natural way that in the African American community that we tend to have some of our deepest, most profound conversations. So this is fitting for me. Uh, so the imagery, the energy that you get from me will be from the visuals as well. I tend not to use a lot of words on the screen. There'll be a lot more visuals. So I'll be asking you to look at those and to sit with them for a bit. So just to kind of get your mind ready for it. But before we do anything else, I'm going to share my screen because I'm going to start this out the way that one of my favorite professors, Dr. Yolanda Silly Ruiz at Teachers College, Columbia University, the way that she would start one of her courses by asking us to write for full presence. Let me go ahead and move this here. 1 second, make sure I can present. From the start. All right. Are you guys seeing black on your screen? Black boxes or anything?
No, we're seeing this full screen.
Perfect. So I'm going to give you just a few minutes just to write for full presence. And what I mean by that is whatever's on your mind right now. The first words that come to your mind in this moment, it might be something totally different or totally not related to this course right now. Whatever it is, take a few minutes and just write. Whatever's on your mind. Can y'all hear that okay? Not too loud? Right. Whatever your last thought is, feel free to finish it or write a question that will prompt you to finish from where you are now. So when you come back to it, it'll give you a kickstart. All right. Well, in that moment, the opportunity right for full presence, I encourage you all to start your classes that way, realizing that when our students come in our classrooms, they come with a lot on their minds. We have a lot weighing on our minds as well. But just giving them an opportunity to write so that they can be fully present with you in that moment, at least whatever it was that was in the back of their head that may cause them to drift off for a moment or stray in their mind to go somewhere else. They've had an opportunity to get it out and at least acknowledge it on paper. Go ahead and take another 30 seconds just to look over whatever it is you wrote. Put a star by something that may be powerful for you that you may really want to think about. That way you've at least acknowledged what's inside of you before you can even allow anything else to be received. Mhm. Now, I know we have 61 participants today, and um, typically in a classroom setting, there likely be less students, or even if you're in a lecture hall, you may ask people to um, share with someone sitting next to them, do a think, pair, share. Just have an opportunity just to express whatever may be on their mind. They may just need a moment, might just need a hug, whatever it may be, a listening ear to get that out. If there are ever any reflections on the course itself, then it's a good opportunity to give them the floor to ask questions from maybe what the previous session was talking about, or something that's related to the readings or the assignments or anything in the world at large that's affecting or related to what you're talking about in class. But this is an opportunity to allow people to show up as themselves. You don't have to stifle your thoughts or get into a showtime mode, right? Where you put on a mask and you act like nothing else in the world is happening. You give them an opportunity to show up as themselves. So this is one of my favorite strategies for starting any class that it may be, no matter what age group it is. Of course, if it's some of the babies, then they may not be able to write, but they may be able to just think about it or at least maybe draw, whatever it is. So moving forward, I'm gonna ask to give you an opportunity to also breathe and ground. Maybe something that you wrote is heavy for you. Maybe it's light, whatever it is, but I want you to take an opportunity to do the first and last thing you'll ever do in life, which is to breathe. The oxygen that fills our lungs, and without it, we're not here anymore, right? Our body ceases to remain alive. So, and by grounding, I mean, well, you may not be outside right now, but if you can place your feet flat on the ground, give yourself an opportunity to connect with Mother Earth, the energy that it brings, and just take a deep breath. Now, when you breathe this time, not just the typical, that feels good, but to be more intentional with your breathing, what's called breath work. And this takes a lot longer than what we're going to do today, but just a moment. If you put one hand on your stomach and one hand on your chest, the bottom of your lungs will fill up. So when you take, I want you to breathe and take 2 breaths in through your mouth, hold it, and slowly release it again through your mouth. Let's try that together. One more, and exhale. Let's do 4 more. You want to feel like your stomach is filled, the bottom of your lungs doing the top. Feel free to close your eyes if you need to. Let's do 2 more. One last one, and release it as slow as you need to. I encourage you to stretch. Acknowledge any tension that may be in your body, because we carry a lot of our thoughts and our energy in our body, that mental energy. is physically felt quite often. So it's important that we acknowledge anything. So if we just want to squeeze our fists and release it, sometimes we don't even know that we're holding tension. Want to stretch your neck, put your shoulder blades together, put your arms out, up in the air, around you. Stretch your legs out, curl your toes, flex those ankles, squeeze those buttocks muscles, your thighs, and just release it. Whatever you need to do to stretch. Take a deep breath while you're doing it. The oxygen will make your muscles a little bit looser. And this is what I call just setting the stage, setting the tone, just releasing the tensions. Because again, we come in with a lot, like our students across all ages. I've literally taught every age group from babies to senior citizen adults. And it doesn't matter what age group, we all carry things. We all come in with things. So just keep it in mind that we're not filling empty vessels. We're facilitating the acquisition of knowledge for other people. So, everybody feeling good? A little bit? All right. So I asked you to look at this here, and you can see the whole screen, yes? No, sometimes. Okay, perfect. This is my LLC logo, Blache Education. Blache, although it is my last name, is also an acronym. I actually have about 20 words for each of those letters, but the essence of Blache is to build a legacy of Africana, critically conscious, healing-centered empowerment education. And I want you to just take a moment just to look at the image, and I want to ask you, what do you notice? Because this is how I'll introduce myself, through imagery. And feel free to throw it in the chat or just unmute yourself and call out what you see. Chat is blowing up. And I'll just start to address them as we get a moment. Okay, many of you are noticing the roots. It's blowing up, let me give it a minute. And just so you know, I am very intentional with every single detail. This is actually just a draft. There's another version coming, but it's evolving like we all are. Right? This has been 25 years in the making for me. So I notice a lot of people said they noticed the roots. So I'll just begin to share. Yes, those roots are what connect me to my ancestral wisdom, my elders, my heritage, my culture, the roots. As you can see, what I'll be drafting or editing is the roots to then form the pieces of the puzzle behind my name. Those are all the various pieces that I've been gathering throughout my career. I've taught in a variety of schools, from public to private to charter to small, large, co-ed, single sex, international, local, just a variety of schools. And that was intentional. I wanted to spend my career learning the best of education around the world. Much of it I learned what I didn't want to do, what I didn't want to duplicate from my own schools. But a lot I learned as well, and things that I wanted to be. So I've been collecting the pieces of the puzzle and pulling out the best practices that I find have been the most helpful for me and for the students that I've been able to engage with and learn, not only teach, but also learn from. I tell my students all the time, you all are my teachers as well. So we're all going to have an exchange like today. So those roots are actually meant to form the outline of the puzzle. So the puzzles right now have fine lines and details, but they're going to actually be more nuanced to show that each puzzle piece will not be the same shape. They will not be cookie cutter at all. They all bring something unique and different. So every school that I've taught at, every community program I've been involved with or developed has been a piece of the puzzle. Every elder, all of my mentors, some I learned what I didn't want to do. Many I learned what I do want to do, what I want to duplicate and add that in. So I'm bringing the pieces of the puzzle together to put them in for the purpose of building a legacy across the world. And so I'm seeing other Mother Nature, absolutely. I try to, not try, I am dedicated to being ecotistical, not egotistical. So eco means that when we think about our identity in the world itself, many of us tend to say we're human-centered, this centered, right? We often place ourselves in the center of the circle, but everything else around us as if we are the center, and everything else, whether it be the elements of the earth, the water, the air, the plants and everything else, all the other animals, all the other elements of the world are for our use. But ecotistical worldview or perspective reminds us that we are actually on the circumference of that circle along with everything else. And we have our own role to play as part of what keeps the world going round. We're not at the center. I tend to put the divine energy at the center. We're all part of the circumference instead. So that's my personal belief. When it comes to Mother Nature, the connections to nature, yes, that's part of my grounding. The animals, that bird here is the Sankofa symbol. The Sankofa bird, and this symbol here is also representative of the word Sankofa, which means to go back and fetch it. And if you ever been to New Orleans, or actually pretty much anywhere in the world where you see this symbol in the ironwork, maybe on your doors, on your gates, in the windows of buildings, this symbol is one of the Adinkra symbols of the Akan people of West Africa. And it literally means to go back and fetch it. It being like what is in the egg of the bird's mouth is your past, your history. To know your history is to know yourself and how you got to where you are. So these symbols, if you like, New Orleans, one of my favorite cities, it's one of the most African cities in the US. And those symbols are all over the place. They're in the church windows, they're on the gates, they're on the doors, they're everywhere. And people seem to think or relate that to like the fleur de lis and Italian artwork and stuff, right? But it's actually a reminder to never forget your history, to go back and look for it. And it's hidden in plain sight. It's everywhere around us. So that's what I try to do. I try to make sure that, like these roots, I'm going back to fetch my history, to know who I am, so that I can tap into that ancestral wisdom and bring that forth as I try to better understand how I got here to my present and better inform how I'm going to proceed in the future. So actually that egg, I think, is the future. And so the woman, yes, that woman represents me. And I do rely heavily on Black feminist perspectives, Africana womanism. I know there's different names, different versions, but for me, it all goes back to empowerment. And many of the people in my life, especially the women, I do honor the men, of course, absolutely. But for me and my journey, academically, scholarly, I do rely heavily on a lot of Black women, the Bell Hooks, the Toni Morrisons, the Joyce Kings, the Gloria Latson-Billings. These are modern people. Some of them are my elders who are living legacies to this day, and some of them have already passed on to become ancestors, but I draw upon that wisdom. There's a lot, many more names, of course. The love, yes, the heart represents love. I try to lead with love, strength. Her arms are the branches, and her hair is natural like my locks, right? And so the greenery is life, full of it. And like that tree that you see, that's the twisted oak. Twisted trees often in Arizona and up in Sedona area, we have these vortexes and they're twisted. We have these twisted trees, literally every inch of the tree, every piece of the wood is twisted. And so that's an indication that there's that vortex energy underneath it. So we're drawing from the earth, we're drawing from everything around us. Our environment matters. And so if you go to New Orleans, you'll see these twisted oaks all throughout, and they're huge. Their limbs go far and wide, just as their roots go just as wide as their limbs, if not further. And so I draw from far and wide. I've literally traveled the world, collecting as much wisdom as I can get. So I don't have to do it, just learn from my own experiences, but learn from those of others. So yes, grace, I'm saying it, roots, everything is connected, absolutely. And so this is not just about me, this is an opportunity for you to consider projects you could do with your students to get them to begin to understand their own identity. Today, I'm gonna ask you to start with your own. As you look at this, does any of this resonate with you? The heart, giving shade, not the petty shade, but yes, shade from things, Black Girl Magic, the puzzle pieces, yes. Looking back to fetch it, yes. Hearts together. Oh, and Colleen, you love Sedona, come on out. It's beautiful year round. So thank you for engaging that with me, everything down to the color, the red, the purple, and the blue. Red and blue together make purple. And actually that's something else I'm gonna be changing a little bit more. The tip will be red and the center will be a lot more purple. That red and blue are two extremes. We often associate red with what? Feel free to come off mic if you need to. Red and blue. When do we see red and blue put as in opposites? I want you to think about that for a second. Heat and ice, hot and cold, anger, yes, absolutely. But we associate red with hot and blue with cold, right? But if you think about it, in nature, blue is hotter than red. For example, I believe Mars is red, Venus is blue. Venus is hotter. And when you think about the flame of a fire, the tips are red. That's the coolest part. And if you have a gas stove, when you turn it on, it's usually blue, right? Yeah. So blue is actually hotter, but we tend to have these perspectives that I don't know why we position red with fire, except for the fact that we tend to see it at its tip, at the very surface. We don't see at the very bottom, right? Down to the roots, or down to the base where it's usually blue. That's the hotter point. So that's also symbolic of me wanting to make sure that I shift all the things in our lives that we've been taught to view in the opposite of what it was meant for. And as a person of African descent, I can tell you that as I've learned more about my African heritage, everything that I was taught to feel negative about, whether it be the spirituality, my hair, my physical features, my dialect, my food, I was told that all those things were bad. And we'll get to that a little bit more. And I'm learning that as I reintroduce those things to myself, or take a new perspective of those things, I'm learning that they're actually meant for my strength. That's where I draw my wisdom from. Those are the things that empower me. And so I'm trying to flip the script again. So bringing that purple to that balance between the two, because it's not always black and white, right? Not always opposites. So I know that was a lot, but I wanted you to get that that energy from this so that you can then think of how this can be a project for you and your students, to get them to engage with themselves, if not through words, then through visuals. Because as they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words and probably more, right? So now I want you to think about yourself. Who are you? We often ask these questions about who am I? We're doing a lot of digging. As you can see in this image here, there's the Bible we look to, or other religious text. We have science, we have life here, it says math over here, and all these other books that we're reading from, English or any other language that we're reading from. We're trying to find out about ourselves. Again, that tree is symbolic. Those twists are symbolic. You can even see his arms here as if he's digging into the ground trying to find himself. What about you? Who are you? As you were writing in your journal, go back and think about that. Just write down some words that describe you. And I wrote the words, oh, I'll give you a moment. Who are you and how do you know? Who told you? What informs your own identity? And I ask this question because as educators, one of the first things I always focus on before we get to the curriculum and all the other things, the text or the materials or the syllabus or anything, my first question is, who are you? And how do you show up to this space? How do you show up to your classroom? I intentionally started the way that I did so that I could show you how I show up. Of course, we're all carrying a lot, but I try to show up with joy, with good energy. The music, the lyrics are about being free. I'm human, but I'm comfortable with me. I show up whole for myself. So I know what I'm bringing to the room because I draw on all that wisdom, all those pieces of my past to come to the room and who I am. And that informs how I show up, what I present, what I say, the energy I bring. And just like babies, students of all ages, they feel your energy. And so your energy can set the tone. Oh, I'm hearing my baby over here. I have a new puppy. You might hear him over here in the background. But who you are, what sources are you drawing from? And do you leave any of those sources behind? Do you not show some of those things? Dr. Kakali Bhattacharya often says that we must be careful not to fragment ourselves into pieces intentionally. Oh, forgive me if I hold my baby because he is a little fussy right now and I owe him some extra milk. So you can go ahead and say hello. I'm going to show up. He is a part of me. He is a baby Chihuahua. He might be a little teacup. So, yeah, but this is Theo. He's going to sit here and be comfortable. So we need some touch, some love, right? Okay. So, thank you. It's my new joy. So again, I'm asking you, how do you show up to this space and this work? This work being education. What are you in the game for? What are you, how are you showing up to the space? So Sean Jenwright has a book and I highly recommend it. Now I have a whole list and I can share that with DR.ABC to share with you all. It's called The 4 Pivots. And the first one is to pivot from lens to mirror. So my lenses that I look through, literally, your theoretical frameworks, your perspectives, the things that you draw from, that's one thing. But what about the mirror? So this is a mirror moment. You already have done some of this. I asked you to write a few words down. You started with full presence. So those things, I ask you, how do you show up to the space? Do you show up with all the tension that's out there? Do you show up with, or better yet, do you show up with joy? Now, again, I'm not trying to say that we need to not acknowledge the tensions that are out there, right? They're real. Again, I just ask you to show up whole, bring that with you, but also let that inform you and how you twist it, how you pivot and begin to think about the opposite, the more positive, the affirming. It's like the difference between saying stop running or saying walk. The focus is still on the running. If we put it in the affirmative, we're telling them what to do, we're giving them instruction, and walk is the expectation. So just how do you show up? So you don't have to answer that question, but you definitely take some notes on that. Does anybody want to chime in? How did you show up to the space today? Did anybody feel heavy? Feel free to throw it in the chat. Anybody, are you showing up feeling like you, or better yet, even to this class today? Do you come to courses that you're learning from with the sense of I have to show up in a certain way? I got to dress a certain way, be a certain way. And of course, there's formalities and expectations. We're going to be presentable and communicate effectively with the people that we're with, right? We sometimes can code switch or change it up a little bit. But does that mean that we need to leave a part of ourselves away? I know I've been asked that. I've often felt that was the expectation. I've been told, don't wear your hair that way. Don't talk too loud. Don't say too much. Don't be too visible. All these protocols of ways we're supposed to be and act that may actually be in contrast to who we really are. So just thinking about that. And just knowing that when your students show up to the space, they're bringing a lot with them as well. We need to acknowledge that. So just to jump back into the fun, bring some more joy back into it. What do I do with my baby? It's one of the questions that Dr. Campbell and I were speaking about, how do I engage in anti-discriminatory, anti-racist, anti-Black racism, anti-oppressive learning? First and foremost, I change those words around. If I am trying to be anti-racist, then I'm being pro what? And I'll open up the chat for that. What is the opposite of being anti-racist? Because we're still focusing on the racism, right? The opposite, like saying walk, stop running versus walk. What is the affirmative, positive form of that? Inclusivity, any other words coming to mind? Thank you. Thank you, Hussein, Serena, David, equity. I'm hearing multiculturalism, pro-diversity, pro-human. not including cultures, other equitable issues. Okay, okay. Because the universe hears the words we speak. And let's say the difference between saying debt free, but the universe still hears debt, 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 debt. So instead of saying debt free, we could say financially abundant. So for human dignity, beautiful, beautiful, seeing all of that. Great. So that's just an idea. So I'm going to focus on those things that bring joy to my classroom. And I highly recommend Dr. Goldie Muhammad new book out. She has a Cultivating Genius. It's a new one, Teaching with Joy, I believe. I may be misquoting, but look up her name. I'll put her name in the chat, GH. Or Dr. Campbell, can you put that in there for me? Goldie Muhammad, her books, look her up. She has a series that I highly recommend, and I'll be shouting out a lot of my mentors and people who I look to for their wisdom. Experiential learning is what I look for. We can learn in many different ways, but there's nothing better than experience. It's, you know, I believe, who was that? They said, if I see it or hear it, solely, just if I only see it or I only hear it, I might remember some of it, right? But if I actually do it, I have my own experiences to draw from. I'm not just trying to get from what you did. You can't help but remember something you're actually engaged in. So experiences, create those experiences. And so give them opportunity to create, to play, to explore. I love Jacob Lawrence's artwork. This is Jake Makes a World. And so this is a book. And so using art in a lot of different ways. I encourage you to use that as much as possible in the way that you teach. Yes, Goldie Muhammad. Thank you, Dr. Campbell. I appreciate that. And so what are some of those ways? So something I did. In 2014, I was at a school here in Arizona, and I was teaching middle school at the time, and I had an opportunity to teach an elective. And I thought, you know what? I was hearing all these things about the students having low writing scores. And in Arizona, we have the FAME scores, it's FAME, and the lowest status is falls far below. E being exceeds, M is meet, and A is approach, but that F is falls far below. And many of our students were labeled as falling far below on these state standardized assessments. And I had to ask myself, you know, what exactly were they assessing? Because when I worked with these babies, they became published authors by the end of the year. As a matter of fact, one of the students who scored the lowest on the state standardized exams published the most poems that year. She became a published writer. Interesting, right? How are we even assessing our kids to say that? So my babies wrote their hearts out. Let me just share a little bit with you. You know what, before I even go on, just in the chat, I want to throw out, what do you think they actually wrote about? Now, these were 7th and 8th graders, ages 12 to 13, well, 11 to 14, I'll say around that. What were they writing about? What topics? Throw it in the chat, or you can come off mic and just shout it out. What do you think they wrote about? Their journey in school, okay. Love, family, relationships, friends, family, sports. Thank you, Madison. Thank you, Caitlin, Sarah, Alex, Brittany, Fatima, Kevin, Brent. Thank you, thank you. I'm seeing relationships, family, friends, family, experiences, interests, their dreams, emotions, community, mental health, things that bring them joy. Yes, their pain, absolutely. Their spaces, nature, they're thankful for, home. Yes, you're all correct. Emotions. So as you would expect, they wrote about, well, some of them wrote about unicorns and rainbows, and I gave them opportunity not just to write their poem, but to express it or create an image that would complement their words that they put on paper. They enjoyed it. They showed up on time. They stayed until the bell rang. Nobody was getting ready to go right before the bell rang. They would wait till the bell rang in order to remind them, oh yeah, we got to switch classes now. So yeah, they wrote about unicorns and rainbows, but they also wrote about, as you said, emotions. Some of them said, just titles, Will Anybody Save Me? At age 12 and 13, they're thinking about needing to be saved. They're thinking about encouraging themselves to stay strong. One girl said, I'm stuck. And she described what that felt like for her. Not only did they write these poems, they also memorized them and recited them. So we had a whole spoken word event. We had some of the local poets come out and support them and encourage them. But this one here, I want to point out the title. The title was, I Killed the Girl, ... And I was like, whoa, red flag, right? But she said, I killed the girl that I used to be, the girl that used to smile all the time. She said, the girl that used to have a lot of friends. And it goes on and on and on. This is actually a pretty long poem that she writes, which is actually the student that has scored the lowest. This is one of her 5 poems that were in the book. Minnie just wrote 1. She wrote 5. But she wanted to kill the girl that she used to be. And she noticed she was changing, but she didn't like who she was. So it's a lot about identity. Many of them wrote about themselves. Finally, me, actually getting to work through their identity, just starting with themselves. Who are they inside? That's why I asked you to think about who you are and how you show up to the space, because you showing up whole gives them permission and an example to show up whole themselves and honor their whole self. No need to fragment. But she says being trapped in a cage. Many of them talking about being stuck and trapped in these boxes that we put people in their identity. The labels that we put place on them. Society tells them who you have to be, but they get a chance to say, I get to be me. Out in the open, ready for adventure, the fun and the craziness. My creative ways lead me to my ways, the ways I was destined for. Finally, me. And then there's those poems that are about, like you said, family. Many of them wrote about their mothers. Look at the way this student wrote the word mommy. Notice it's dripping. And I told them to use whatever color, font, size, shape they want, anything. And I encourage them all to use some color. So she added this beautiful flower here. But the words over here, I want to point out, most days I feel like screaming and crying at the top of my lungs. I want my mother back. Who is this monster you have become? You love someone else much more than me. Her name is Crystal, meth, and you won't set her free. Whew. This one over here, she won't put the flask in her hand down. She likes the burn of liquor down her throat. She won't stop crying and crying and crying and washes the memories away. She won't put the cigarette down, likes the feel of rebellion. She won't stop coughing and wheezing, her memories burning inside her mind. Whew. Mom, do you remember me? And this baby girl here was also that student who, like I said, yes, Dr. Campbell?
Just have to jump in there a little bit, Dr. Blaché. It's weird. There's just a connection. I'm reading, and you can go back to one slide, please. Go back to the slide
Sure.
about mommy. And sometimes, back home in the old church, we are black who belong to understand the Pentecostal church. We said, the Lord, he moves in a mysterious way.
Hey.
I'm seeing my students, and some of them have chosen to do a creative assignment for this course. And today, I wanted to, later on after you were finished, to just talk a little bit more about the poetry that some have chosen to write. And the fact that this is not a class where you're taking poems just to write about the hibiscus or the roses, but to write poems that are written in your heart. One of my students called me just this week. Our poem is going to be in a book, and it was a poem she wrote in my course, this course, about being Black, and it was powerful. And now I'm seeing this. So I just want to say to my students, I don't need to explain anything else to you. You got it. I know you got it. I see you, David, looking at me. I'm looking at you, David. For the play, you're right. You got it. The intentionality behind your words. Right now, I'm feeling so much energy and so much emotions, because this is exactly what I'm talking about. Thank you. Thank you. I'm done. Move on.
Thank you. So just holding space, just acknowledging their existence, letting them use their voice to express even when they're upset with you for not feeding them enough. Yes. She writes, she actually lived with her mother. And she was just saying, her mother keeps passing her by, and because you were always worried about your job. So much time just trying to survive, or stuck in survival mode or crisis mode. This poem here was written by one of my boys, and it's in the shape of a teardrop. And it says, if you give me a second chance, I swear I'll make it right. He wrote this as the words he wishes his father would say to his mother to apologize for breaking her heart. This one over here caught me by surprise. There were a couple people who wrote a poem called I Hate You. There was a lot of those poems like that. But this one was one of the cold lines I ever wrote a 12-year-old write. She said, if I was God, I wouldn't send you to heaven, but I wouldn't send you to hell either, because hell is too good for you. You are proof of God's non-existence, because if God was real, he would have made you. Basically, God don't make mistakes. I said, dang, that's cold. I mean, I was just like, blew my mind that this 12-year-old was writing that. So like, are you all right? Are you mad at somebody? She's like, no, I'm good. Just cheesing, little pigtails, you know. But this is what's coming out of them, 12 years old. Some of them wrote, just without even saying anything, just look at the imagery and the words that stand out to you. I'm gonna keep going, though we have there's much more to cover. Unhappy life demons. So that was in 2014. Fast forward to 2017, I'm in a class in New York with, it's a predominantly Afro-Caribbean community in Brooklyn. And I'm with my students, and we're launching this course, AP seminar, the capstone through the College Board, which is the predecessor to the current AP African American Studies course being launched in its pilot phase. So as we were piloting the African diaspora theme with the AP seminar, the first question I got on the day, I first entered the classroom and introduced myself, said this course will be about the African diaspora. And as our theme, as we're learning research and writing skills, critical thinking skills to be used transferably throughout your life. But we're going to use the theme of the African diaspora. And the very first question, this beautiful chocolate young lady stood in front of me, or sat in front of me, and she asked, does Africa really look like they show you on TV? And as a child born in the 70s, raised in the 80s, I immediately had some flashbacks. I don't know the age range of you all here, and you're in Canada or where you may be, but in the US, there's been this campaign. Let me just read you a little bit of my own work for a second, and just let this resonate with you if you can give me a quick moment. I know, baby, I know. I titled this part, this is actually part of my dissertation. This is Africa Through Multiple Lenses. Does Africa really look like they showed you on TV? She said. You see, for me, it had been many years since I had spent any significant time watching TV, but I knew exactly what she meant. This catalytic query conjured confusing conjectures and disturbing dissonance. And even without closing my eyes, I could still see Sally. These beautiful Black babies brought back bothersome baggage. It was disturbing to think that decades later, one can still see Sally Struthers and countless others strutting along the stolen streets of Senegal, Sierra Leone, and others, parading their political power and privileges, charging us to chip in some chump change for the chocolate children of these African villages, deliberately designed to depict desolation, infinitely inflicted with incurable infectious diseases, creating critical conditions they were forced to endure with little to no hope for a cure. So it was no surprise that these students saw no value in their African roots. Some seemed so eager to erase the Afro and Afro-Caribbean, determined to deter themselves from anything African and just be American. The words they associated with Africa initially were stereotypically negative. And I'll put these out there for you. They were stereotypically negative. Africa offered very little more than famine, disease, and war. The most common word, poor. Since well before the Berlin Conference of 1884, Europeans had been scrambling for Africa's treasures to use and abuse for their personal pleasures. But once they agreed to stop enslaving and commodifying her people, they fully implemented the divide and conquer strategy, a half-millennium campaign intended to paint Africa as a standard image, the standard image of poverty, with major problems that only Europeans could solve, because supposedly Africans were still trying to evolve. Africans were not fully human, wild, untamed, savage. Their intelligence quotient was still as far less than average, right? No. But that's the theme of the white supremacist story, and they've stuck with it. They repeated the lies so often they've convinced the world, including us, to believe it. Ain't that something? But my intelligence is legit, and I know it. One of the students said, I always thought Africa was a poor country, always in need of help. But Kayla was quick to correct, but with care and respect, she said, correction, Africa is a continent, not a country. A common distortion like the Mercator map projection, encouraging the rejection of our ancestral connection to Mother Africa. Because like Black lives, size matters. Forced to shrink our greatness to allow pro-colonial countries to maintain this education and magnify the myth of the white man as the supreme human by default because they've omitted the truths and limited access to the voting booths. So Confederates can control the curriculum to keep Blacks at the bottom of the racial spectrum, accordingly teaching that no one else has done anything significant. So only the white man is important. So our history is left out. And there's a lot more to that, of course, but just a hint of the energy that I felt in that one moment. It was like it was an eternity of thoughts rushing back for me. I relived those moments of watching that on TV. And to think that years later, these babies, 15-year-old students, got those same images in their head, have to ask that question, does it look like they see on TV? And when I asked them, this is what they described to me. So the problem I noticed was that many of the Black youth in the US and across the world, honestly, even in Africa, hold very negative perceptions about Africa, the diaspora, and themselves, even as African descendants. And this symbol here is the symbolic of the tree of forgetting. This is, you can find this on the coastline of Owita, Benin, on the path to the door of no return, one of the many slave ports in West Africa. And so when we think about what our students are thinking about for their own image of themselves, how they see themselves, you know, they're thinking about Africa and the world at large, but then when we come back, I mean, we're trying to hold these positive images and bring joy, but then they're coming to the classroom with this on their mind. And this list is small compared to our reality. This is a snap in time. This is just in the last, what, decade, right? And there's so much more than that, even for the last few years. But then we're talking about history, all the names we don't know. So this is W.E.B. Du Bois's library in Ghana. And so I'm drawing upon racial and ethnic identity as a theme. Schooling versus education, they are not the same, they are different, and critical literacy for identity development. So what I'm talking about today when it comes to anti-racism, anti-Black racism, anti-discrimination, we're gonna pivot and look at identity development and think about critical literacies, particularly African diaspora literacy. And know that schooling and education are not the same. Schooling is to program you, to get you to assimilate to the societal expectations, but education teaches you to think no matter what the curriculum says, you're able to think for yourself. That's true empowerment, versus schooling is just do what I told you to do, regurgitate it, right? And so my framework is African diaspora literacy, and I'll just kick past this. I know I want to get more time, and just stop for a second and ask if there are any questions burning that you want to talk about. Anything on your mind so far? Feel free to throw it in the chat box. Whenever you do, I'll stop and come back to it. But this I want to go ahead and jump into because this is something that is current. What are some of the things that we're currently battling? And this is an issue in the US, but I'm sure this is an issue throughout the world. The College Board. So the course that that the AP seminar with African diaspora content led to was the AP African American Studies course. Now, this is the first course to be offered, or the African diaspora studies theme with AP seminar was the first to be offered with anything dealing with Africa at all. Even when it comes to AP history, the period of time that they try to focus on is everything from like the late 1400s and beyond, right? Nothing prior to that is touched on too much. But the College Board has been very active in trying to change that. They've got a lot of criticism for us. They've been very active about it. And so this new course is out. And Florida, the state of Florida, with their current governor, has said that they passed the anti-woke law, anti-woke. I want to just sit with that, anti-woke. Say it in your head for a moment. and think, what does that mean to be anti-woke? Or as we're saying, we're going to pivot. What's the opposite of anti-woke? Or, yeah, what does it mean to be woke? Anybody want to chime in? Serena says pro-consciousness, pro-critical. Anything else come to mind? Anti-woke equals asleep. Thank you, Colleen. Alex said aware of the truth. John says aware of systems of oppression. Unconscious, Colleen says. Lucas says critically conscious within socio-political context. Awake to the realities of society. Thank you, Brent. Fatima says, what is woke? I don't know. Okay, well, woke. Woke is actually a term that was used for positive intent initially, but there's this pattern. And I must say, it's interesting to constantly see the Willie Lynch's playbook play out over centuries. Willie Lynch, the story of Willie Lynch, I encourage you to look that up. Willie Lynch is said to have been one of the people who wrote the playbook for how to enslave people, how to ensure that they were obedient, that you could maintain slavery if you practice these certain things. And it was basically the divide and conquer strategy. Well, if you divide people, you can conquer them easier, right? If you cut somebody by themselves, you can take them down much easier than it would be if they were all collectively together. So putting things in opposition, just like those red and blue, hot and cold. When you hear words like voodoo, do you automatically think something negative, evil, taboo? Or do you realize that voodoo is a form of spirituality that has nothing to do with negativity or evil at all? It only promotes positive energy, awareness, connection to nature. Sadaf says, anti-woke is anti-things. They, people passing this law, don't like. Whatever that is, never defined all the way, because then there isn't room to make it include more and more and more as the lawmakers' powers increase. Okay. So to be woke is, like they said, to be aware of things that are happening around you, to be aware of the truth. So if they don't want you woke, they want you asleep. They want you to believe whatever they tell you. They want you to believe those constant negative narratives that are being perpetuated, those stereotypes, right? So the anti-woke law basically said, like one of my professors teaches it in Florida, and she said that basically all her classes are outlawed. She teaches decolonial qualitative research methods. Is that being too woke? They demonize the words like critical race theory and all these other things that come up, right? There's always a word around every decade. There's a new word. There's a new word that was meant for positivity that they'll twist the narrative and say, this is actually meant for something evil. It's bad, right? So this is what they put out there. They say intersectionality, this is the concerns they have. It's foundational to CRT, right? They've already demonized that word, not even understanding the real meaning of it. And it says ranks people based on their race, wealth, gender, and sexual orientation. It doesn't rank people at all. These are lies. It includes Kimberly Crenshaw, known as the founder, they put that in quotes, right, of intersectionality, co-editor of critical race theory. They're talking about Angela Davis, self-avowed communist and Marxist. Why is it a problem? Okay, including readings that they go through this. And so I'll just give you they had a problem with movements for Black lives, right? It says there's an organization which stated objectives that include eliminating prisons and jails, ending pretrial detention, and concluding the war on Black, trans, queer, gender nonconforming, and intersex people. Why would we not want to end the war on people trying to live their lives in their own way, right? But they are putting this out there. They're saying that, you know, bell hooks is a problem. They're concerned about these Black feminist literary thoughts. This is not okay. This will allow people to be woke. We don't want that. We're anti-woke. We don't want people to be critically conscious. We don't want them to think for themselves. We want them to basically believe whatever we tell them to believe, right? And so the reparations movement, how dare they talk about reparations? All points and resources in this study advocate for reparations. There is no critical perspective or balancing opinion in this lesson. Balancing opinions, but you can't talk about Angela Davis? Is that not a balance of opinions? Right? So just this right here from Florida, they actually published this to say that's the problem. So as we look to the future, ladies and gentlemen, we look to the future, what do we do now? And I know we're at the top of the hour. We have a good 30 minutes left. What do we do now? And I'd love for you all to come off the mics and let's talk a little bit. What do we do about the future? I have some thoughts about it, of course, through my research. All right. He just wanted some love. Look at him, he's asleep already. Up, trying to wake up. I'm gonna put him away. Go ahead. Something about that touch, huh? What do we do now? We show up with love. We start by looking in the mirror, making sure that we show up whole. We do this work ourselves. Let me ask you, how many of you as youth grew up learning about these topics? This missing history. Do you feel like you were miseducated as well? Because if so, we have a lot of work to do for ourselves. Azaria says yes. Colleen says yes to miseducation. A lot of the stuff we're trying to teach right now, we didn't get this in school either. And think about it. If we didn't get it in school, then that means that our teachers didn't get it when they were in school. Our parents, our elders didn't get this. And for those who are aware of it, they're likely scholars of it because this is what they studied. They actually have a doctorate degree in it. They went to the furthest point of education to learn this, or they happen to be around people who have these conversations regularly, or maybe they lived it. But these narratives, these negative narratives, this Willie Lynch playbook of divide and conquer and make them think everything that is beautiful about them is bad. Like Martin Luther King says, if you look in the dictionary with the word white, you'll see the word purity, clean. You look at the word good, right? You see, and he said, if you look up the word black in a dictionary, maybe not today, maybe still, you'll see all these negative terms associated with it. And then they associated that with us as people. So again, all these mind tricks being played to get us to think negatively about ourselves and disempower us from the very thing that makes us whole, that makes us strong. So I'm reversing my schooling now. Yes, thank you, Dr. ABC, for this work and for this space. Because as we think about the work that we're doing, if we didn't get this, then we got to go back and learn it. We're learning along with our students. So this is a lot of work, right? As a teacher, as an educator, we are lifelong learners. We got to continue to learn along the way. So just a quick part that the research that I did allowed my babies to learn a lot about themselves. In my research, I had Afro-Caribbean students, and I took them through that AP seminar. I took them through a series of experiential learning opportunities. We left the state and went to different places like Philadelphia. We went to DC, to the museums. They lived in Brooklyn. I took them to Harlem, which isn't very far away at all. That's still in New York City, same city, different borough, if you will, in Manhattan. But they had never been to Harlem. They hadn't had soul food. Candy yams was new to them. I was shocked. I was like, wait a minute, what? These different foods, right? To realize the richness of the diversity within just the African diaspora alone. But they had those questions of identifying themselves as African was something negative. But now they can look in the mirror and proudly identify not just their socially constructed race, but their ethnicity, their culture, and have a positive connection to it, their hair, and the words that they're asking when they look at Haiti and the Dominican Republic and asking, why are they on the same island, but they're different and they're actually battling? What is that about? Where's that history coming from? And they begin to find more common things among them than they did differences that were negating. So again, this was all opportunities for them to look at it. And I associated with Black Cake. I'll stop there. I don't want to go into the Black Cake too much yet. I'm still writing my framework in more detail. I want to present that later, but I associated with the it's beautiful, delicious treats. that it takes very, it's not something you make every day. It's a very special cake, but it has roots in the English speaking Caribbean. Um, and there's so much beauty about it. Here, I'll give you a little taste. Let's see. There's the purpose behind it. There is special meaning. It goes back to sugar. One of the main ingredients of black cake is burnt sugar. And literally you take a pan on the stove, you put some sugar in it and you let it burn. But not too much to make it bitter, just enough to make it this liquid black flavoring that gives it something unique. But to burn sugar goes back to the historical narrative. Now, a lot of our history is hidden in plain sight, again, for us to go back and fetch it in creative ways. And so in the Caribbean, the crop was sugarcane. Like we know, we're picking cotton, they were harvesting cane. And one of the strategies to pick sugarcane was to burn the fields, set them on fire, but not burn them completely, just enough to uh, uh, um, push away any pests that may be in the fields, and also to strip away some of the leaves that took a long time. So it made it easier to harvest. So you had to light it on fire, but then put the fire out, and they would send the enslaved Africans to go put the fire out. But to resist, they would let it burn. You probably heard songs about this, right? We don't need no water, let it burn. The building can burn down, we jamming still. So they would dance, they would celebrate as they let the fields burn. That was a form of resistance. So black cake is not just some delicious treat to be eaten around the holidays. It's Christmas cake, it's fruit cake, it's done for weddings, special occasions. It's actually symbolic of our history. And that special ingredient, that burnt sugar, helps us to remember this. But I've asked elders in the Caribbean, and many of them don't know that it has connections to that history. But we still have it. So this is that burnt sugar we find in anybody's cast iron skillet. It's black on purpose. And black cake, now, if you made it without the burnt sugar, it'd probably be the color of the palm of your hand. But you add the burnt sugar to make it darker. And from what I've learned from the people who make it throughout the Caribbean, the color of the cake usually reflects their skin tone. I know some people in Jamaica love it. So it's definitely black on purpose. And like the curriculum that I've been developing, it's black on purpose. We intentionally made sure that there were people who looked like those children around them. There were the curriculum was African centered, or African influenced. There's multiple parts, by the way. The ingredients, some of the best parts of making it a fruit cake / rum cake, but we put all that together and it becomes black cake because those fruits individually, sure, we can get a handful of prunes or currants and raisins and cherries and mixed peel, which is citrus peels, candied. You can get all those and eat them separately and they're all good, right? They're all good. But when you soak them in liquid spirit, and that's red wines and sweet red wines and rums, and you let them soak for a long time to soak up the spirit, you put them all together. Now that collective flavor, you mix them like it is back here, that's a whole new flavor. And that speaks to the need for there to be comprehensive effort in our curriculum. So when we're teaching, are we sticking to the book? You know, too often when we have our books, like when you were in school, you probably had a book and said, okay, read pages 1 to 10, and they answer the questions at the end. And you'd always know the answers were in the book. That was what dictated what the answer should be, right? That's how we knew what we were supposed to be talking about. So it's better to be interdisciplinary, or better yet, the new term is transdisciplinary, which meaning that we're not just teaching math or science or history and English art or language arts separately. They were never meant to be separated. Actually, African pedagogy was always taught in context of life. Everything was together, everything had a purpose. We didn't separate them. And that's probably why people have a hard time understanding them. Like, I don't need this particular subject. I can just be good at English. I don't need to be good at math. But if you put them back together, the pieces of the puzzle, right? Then you get a better understanding of knowledge and how things work in the world. And transdisciplinary goes beyond just teaching across disciplines. It goes to the purpose of teaching for the sake of being able to implement what you learn in real life. So everything is transferable to real life, right? is applicable. And one of the best things about it for me is that it's not just done in general, it's done with the understanding that what you do with that information is meant to make life better for your community. So when our students think about how they're going to use that information, they're thinking, like for the students in my research, my babies, they one of them wanted to become an OBGYN, an obstetrician gynecologist, because when she was reading and researching in the course, she learned that Black women often die in labor, that they have a hard time conceiving or giving birth, and that the statistics were just staggering, that they were mistreated during their birthing process. So she wanted to contribute back to that by becoming an obstetrician gynecologist herself, so that she could better influence the community, be of service to it. So yes, a t-shirt, Black on Purpose, I love that. And so I thought about Cynthia Dillard's framing of remembering, which means to remember, not just to recall information, but to reconnect yourself, become a member again of your culture by revisioning Africa through multiple lenses. Students became aware of their own biases. So I ask you, can you revision your own self and become aware of your biases? Will that allow you to generate more questions for yourself about Africa, the diaspora, people of African descent, people of color, anyone who's been marginalized or oppressed today? Begin to research and reclaim your origins. That's what they did. So students, a lot of them Caribbean, Haitian particularly, they began to see the connections where no matter where they are, they're African. Their ethnic identity was more important than their racial identity, because race changes, right? Even from being, what was it? Colored, Negro, Black, African American, all these names. Society keeps dictating who we are, but how do we then begin to define ourselves, right? They begin to positively identify themselves through critical thinking. So these anti-woke laws, these curricula that are out there that are getting students to think critically, to ask questions and challenge society for the way it is today, these problems that we're coming up against, this is what we need. And the more that we keep pushing back on that, the more that we're going to stifle our students' ability to learn and think for themselves. So we cultivated cultural competence and critical consciousness. We did journaling, we did presentations, and took field trips, and left the classroom, did a lot of stuff outside the classroom. And their college and career decisions, again, were based upon their desires to contribute to the community at large. So they were recognizing and representing community as classroom. We left the classroom and went to the people in the community, created a walking tour of Harlem through the arts. They get to ask questions like, in what ways does the Harlem's public spaces represent the Black freedom struggle? And they looked at the art on the walls and the statues of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and said, okay, as I look around, the street names even, that informs me about my history. But not many cities are shaped that way. The artwork sometimes perpetuates the hatred too often. But they begin to notice that, and they created their own walking tour. Beautiful. So all those ingredients being put together, we have to remember that we're facilitators and we have a lot of learning to do ourselves. Do it over a long period of time. It does take a village, the process of building that cake. And then once we're done, is it just that they were happy in our classroom? Or is it that we also have another opportunity to make sure that what we taught them sticks with them long after they've left our classrooms? So we need to make sure that we shield them with all as much as we can. And I know we only have about 15 minutes left, so I'm gonna stop. I know I've just been talking and talking, and I just wanna get past that and go back actually just to put this up here so you can get in touch with me. What resonates with you right now from what we've talked about today? And thank you for chiming into the conversation. Here's my email if you want to contact me after this, but what questions do you have? Let me, I'll give a quick second. I'm gonna write down my email, lashe.education@gmail. And come on, I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see all your faces too and discuss this with you all. Just have a conversation. You good? Okay. And I'll put it in the chat box, make that easier. All right, that was a lot. I know I talk about stuff all day long. We just sit and chat and just have a conversation, but what's resonating with you as educators to be or current educators? What's coming up for you?
Please go ahead and use the raise on icon. I want us to definitely share. Need to hear your voice. And that's just for not for students only, but for community members. I see you as well. There's so much. There is so much. There is so much. There is so much. And I just want to say for me, the black cake analogy is powerful. I come from that history. I come from that. So I could tell you more. It's powerful. And it's also a bit sad, but also powerful that when you said you spoke to elders and they didn't know that story. I didn't know the story as well. But the moment you said it, it connected. You know, I'm doing something using Negro spiritual, working songs, talk about Black joy. People don't realize Black joy is not about just being in the club, living your best life, which I can do. It's more than that. It started out of how we survived, why we did work songs. I'm doing something like you're talking, Dr. Blaché, about work songs, but the connection to food. And then the next slide, when you put all the other ingredients, that thing resonated with me because we have to realize in this work of disruption, all of us, the coming together, the joy in being a real true ally. You know, we look at in a room with a lot of white faces, and as I've been saying that to my white student, your job is in this. It's not something extra and extended. It's how you also help to build this black cake. It's how you help to be a part, the ingredients. What do you bring to the table, you know, to do this work? And I just want to thank you with the love in which you poured into this conversation this morning. So I'm going to ask my students and community, please share. This is your time to share. Don't be shy. Share. I know you have something to share. Go ahead and continue inviting them, Dr. Blaché.
Yeah, I'm seeing some things pop up in the chat now. Thank you. Keep it coming. And I invite you to come off the mic as well if you want to expand a bit. But just to say real quick, I am giving a full lecture on my Black Cake framework. There's so much more to it, to nuance and to discuss. And I'll definitely share that information with DR.ABC so that we can have you guys attend that as well. But I'll jump in here. Let's see. So Serena, thank you. She said, as an educator, I recognize the importance of incorporating counter storytelling into my lesson planning in order to bring perspectives that are outside of the dominant white supremacist lens. Thank you. You want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, two hands are up, Serena and Brent. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to expand on what you had mentioned about the images that your students had been given of Africa and just like that perspective and how important it is. Like we speak a lot about representation. And so for me, like I love children's literature, so I'm always looking at books that like really represent the kids in my classroom because I've worked in toddler and preschool rooms, and it's so important for them to see themselves and their families, as well as like different structures of families too, of like, you know, having two moms, having two dads and whatever, like just showing that so that my kids see themselves in the curriculum, right? So it's just like that they feel welcome and that we're creating that safe space for our kids.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. We have Brent.
Hi. Thank you very much. Hopefully you can hear me. I really enjoyed the lecture today. Thank you so much. One thing that really resonated with me was just kind of right at the beginning, this right for full presence. I thought that was such a powerful moment because while we do lessons on Zoom, like it's so easy to disconnect. And like myself, I was thinking about all these things that I have to do. And just giving us that moment like really allowed me to focus and take some things out of it. Like there's a presentation that I thought I was doing today, I'm doing on Thursday, and there's things that I'm adding to it now just from this lecture to that. So thank you for giving us that opportunity.
Thanks, Brent. Good stuff, Brent. And Brent, jump in there. And it's what I love about how Dr. Blaché teaches, just like my style, is that no matter what we're lecturing, we're also leaving you with these quote unquote good practices. I don't use the word best practice. Good practices say, hey, try this. I'm modeling this. So when we talk about model, as Dr. Blaché started, I just was smiling because I was like, that's what I believe in, modeling. And so, yeah, use that, Brent. Trust me, I've taken so much from Dr. Yolanda Sule, you raised as well. And for other professors right here in Isaac, you know, Mary Green, and also how many people do their things. You bank You deposit all these good ideas and bring them back to your space. So yeah, run with this, Brent. Love it. I think we have Brittany. Thanks, Brent.
I just wanted to like share an experience that I had when I was in the 7th grade, because the whole conversation of, how we've received these images of Africa, so like that really rang true with me. And one experience that I had, so one of my best friends was from Zambia, a country in Africa. And like my best friend, she was living good. Like she had a really nice house over there, mansion. Like it was really nice. Like I would hear stories about her experience over there. I'm like, man, like you have it good. Like I'm jealous. And then I remember, so we were in a class together. We had the same teacher, and my teacher, like, she just started going off about Africa being poor and everything. And I was just kind of looking at her, and I made eye contact with my friend, and I just started laughing. I'm like, what is she talking about? Like, everything I've heard from your experience, like, you've got it good over there. And then the teacher, she actually got mad at me, and she's like, this is not funny. This is serious. I'm like, nah, you need to reflect on what you're saying, because what you're saying is just so backwards. Also, I had a question, because when you were talking, Renisha, when you were talking about the black cake analogy, actually my cat started meowing at the door, so I kind of missed what you said. So I just wanted to get like a refresher of like what the history was of the black cake. Yeah, because I missed it. Like my cat came to the door and I just missed it.
No worries at all.
But it's Alice, jump in there because I want us to move on quickly. Don't worry, Brittany, it's recorded, and I'm going to literally post the recording today in our class notes. So you can have the recording and go back to that part.
Okay, thank you.
But it's really good stuff for you to do. So I'm definitely gonna post that recording for you, Brittany. So don't worry.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And thanks for sharing that.
I
Yeah.
also noticed Kevin said it was so eye-opening to see the students write so deeply and so personally. Thank you for giving them space to do so. The poetry really hit me. Good, I'm glad. And again, this is things that you can do. You can incorporate it into your lessons. And what are you teaching? Any particular subject? What are you teaching? Math, science, as you know, those separated disciplines. You can also add writing as a writing component to any lesson that you're doing. Anything. It takes some creativity, of course, and feel free to email me. I love brainstorming different ideas and ways to incorporate that. The stop running versus walk, answer versus pro. Yeah. Anytime you hear a word, ask yourself, what does that mean? Like they have the word and Antifa, which is short for anti-fascism. So if you're against fascism, but they're saying it's bad to be part of Antifa or anti-fascist, so are you pro-fascism? What does that mean? Wasn't that what Hitler was promoting? Help me understand. But we have these words that are put out there, and people are just saying it, and now it becomes these buzzwords. But people don't really stop to think about, wait, what does that mean? They say Antifa's bad. People who are anti-fascist are bad. So is fascism good? These are the questions I have to ask myself, right? So just thinking about that. I start every lesson by defining the terms that we use. What's the origin of the word? To get them to understand even what they're saying. Because those words become buzzwords that people demonize, don't even realize they're perpetuating a negative narrative about something that actually had positive meaning. So that's one of those patterns from the Willie Lynch's playbook, still playing out. Serena says, during a practical experience in 5-6, my AT also did a daily silent write. Perfect. Haya, Kim, Sunki said, to acknowledge our students' existence. The writing is such a powerful activity. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Sadaf, mental energy is felt in physical energy. Yes, yes, yes. What we think takes place in our bodies. A lot of our stress, stress will kill you before any disease does. Stress causes disease, right? Being mindful of the connection. Do you want to expand on that? Oh, I see Lucas's hand is up. And then Sadaf, if you want to expand, please do. Lucas, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Blanchet. Yeah, I found it really profound what you said about shifting our thinking and thinking about messages and what is the actual meaning of it. And just thinking, is it actually the opposite in the analogy you gave of the flames and the red and the blue?
Mhm.
Something to really think about. I
Yeah.
found it. Yeah.
Yeah, I highly encourage you to always nuance the language that's being used. Because too often language is used in ways that it might be one word, but it has so much power, so much meaning behind it. And if we don't, if we're not careful, we'll take something that means something beautiful, like the word woke, like the word hotep. Hotep. People don't even know what hotep means. It actually means peace. People are like, oh, they'll see someone and call them, oh, there's those hoteps, those they'll change it up and say those no taps. I'm like, do you realize hotep means peace? You know, oh, you just want to be woke, huh? I guess you woke now. Like, are you not? Are you asleep? I mean, what is that? So just really thinking about the language. And so when people come at you in these ways, I always throw it back at them to say, okay, well, let's talk about it. Let's define these terms. Flipping the script. Yes, Serena. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other question? I know we have at least a good 4 or 5 minutes left. Any burning comments or anything that you're curious to try in your own classrooms or to include in your curriculum? And by curriculum, of course, we know the definition of curriculum is more than just the physical materials that you use, but it's also the way you show up to your classroom. It's the hidden curriculum, if you will, right? The thoughts and energy, the resources that you draw upon to connect with the students. Serena?
Hi, thank you for listening to me again. And thank you so much for your lecture. It was amazing. I just wanted to get some feedback from you when it comes to the poetry that you did with your students, that lesson, and some Black feminist writers that you like to bring into the classroom.
Yes. Oh, a little bit more?
Yeah, just like some of your favorite writers. If you can't share right now, I'm always happy to like.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a long
later.
list. I predominantly teach K through 12 throughout most of my career, but I've also taught in college. So in the Intro to African American Studies courses, you're going to get the W.E.B. Du Boises, the Zora Neale Hurstons, the Fannie Lou Hamer, the Malcolm X and MLK, you know, the iconic people, but also you get to the Audre Lordes, the Bell Hooks, the Toni Morrison books. You know, she writes stories that are fiction, but they have so much truth that resonates with so many people, right? Octavia Butler, you know, is out there now. The list, Maya Angelou, Langston Hughes, the poetry. I love poetry specifically. I write poetry myself. I love the creativity of it, but there's so many powerful messages in it. Who else do I bring in my class? I mean, today I bring in some of the scholars that I rely upon: Asa Hilliard, Joyce King, Ernest Morel. He writes
Ruiz.
Yeah, Yolanda Silly Ruiz, Goldie Muhammad, Christopher Emden. He writes about his new book, Ratchetdemic. You know, how to be ratchet in your academic self, to bring your whole self to the table. He writes a lot about hip hop pedagogy as well. You know, so you're bringing current culture into your classroom, so you can meet them where they are. You know, when we're talking to our students, we want to relate to them in ways. So, you know, you don't want to be the person who's trying to relate to them by just trying to fake it, if you will, right? But you bring it in ways that are as authentic as possible. And you showing up authentically allows your students to feel comfortable being their authentic selves too, to just hold the space for them. I bring in a lot of meditation, healing-centered practices. Sean Jenwright, you know, I'm working with teachers in Vermont right now, and we're using this book, particularly The 4 Pivots, to talk about pivoting from lens to mirror, pivoting from transactional to transformational or transformative relationships. So he talks about awareness, connection, vision, and presence. So with vision, he's saying we need to shift from problem fixing to possibility creating. Again, be in the affirmative, right? Focus on the positive. Doesn't mean ignore the negative. It does mean to focus on the solutions, right? And then presence, move from hustle to flow. Anybody who talks about rest, I'm trying to get away from this grind culture. You know how Facebook shows you your memories and you go back 7 years ago, you posted this. And it's like, yeah, I'm on the grind. I'm in the office getting this done. It's like 2, 3 in the morning. Is that really what we want to do? Because I noticed I had a lot of health issues arise because of the way I was mistreating my body, not allowing myself to rest. And that I was often overloaded in my mind. And so even my thoughts didn't feel as clear. And it wasn't until I rested that I gained so much more clarity. So do we give our students pause in the classroom? Do we give them a moment to write for full presence? Do we start and end and build in time for them to sit back and reflect, take a deep breath, rather than just cramming everything down their throat? You got to memorize all this stuff. We're going to get through this chapter. I'm going to present it to you. Whether you get it or not, it's up to you. There's a test on Friday. Get it and go, right? Or do we take time to breathe and let it marinate and sit with that? So our relationship to time is a struggle. That's also part of the Black Cake framework is time. And I know it's 9:30 when I want to honor your time and say, if you have to go, I understand, DR.ABC, feel free if you want to speak to that. People needing to go if they need to. But if you have a couple minutes just to think about that for a second in your relationship to time, are you always trying to move, and doing so much that you don't even build in breaks in between your schedule? So if you look at your calendar, and I'm guilty of this myself, and I'm working on myself, I'm healing in these ways, that if I have a meeting from 8:30 to 9:30, I'm not planning something and maybe until 10:30 to give myself time to relax, to debrief with myself, to meditate, to eat, take a quick bio break if need be, and just really sit with that so that I can make sure that I check in with me so that the next thing that I do, I can show up whole to that as well, and be fully present in the next moment. But if we're constantly jumping from one thing to the next, then we don't give ourselves time to breathe and even to think about what we just got. So thank you all for pouring back into me with your questions, with your comments, with your thoughts, your energy, showing up whole. Yes, Sarah, Lucas, again, putting into practice, honor the whole self. And Fatima, and I hope I said everyone's names correctly. If I don't, please correct me so I can learn. I said, the last one Fatima said, you said history is always in plain sight and how we often ignore or forget it. Even forgetting history is often repeated. And to disrupt it, we should learn from past mistakes instead of repeating them. Everything connects to each other like puzzle pieces, yes. So I'll leave you with this thought about the Willie Lynch story. I encourage you to read that book, because what that will let you know is that that playbook is literally playing out right now. And to keep us from reading and learning about the history keeps us from recognizing the patterns that are still in play today. The same playbook, divide them, conquer them, tell them that everything that we know is empowering them is bad, demonize it, outlaw it, change the policies, keep them away from the truth so that they stay asleep and we can just guide them wherever we want them to go. It's time to wake up, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity to hold this space, DR.ABC.
Thank
Always a
you.
pleasure to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. These are the kind of conversations I want for my students, for community to join us. And that is why I'm so intentional about these community classes. Every single course that I do, I reserve 2 classes for community, and everywhere is different. We bring in community to listen, to share. Next on Thursday, you all know on Thursday, we're going to have a panel of educators, 3 principals, 3 principals, 1 vice principal. And the questions we're going to talk about sit on the topic of equity, diversity, inclusion, racism, anti-Black racism, and different things. And so we want this. But I love that I started with Dr. Blaché for intentional reasons. So you understand and model some of the things that you see, get some of this goodness, these ideas, and understand the many ways you can have these conversations. Something that stuck with me through the conversation that I've used in K to 12, and I definitely wanted Dr. Blaché, and I didn't tell Dr. Blaché what to share, but the intentionality behind the poetry and allowing your kids to write, empowering them to write. So you see all that equity, diversity, inclusion, identity stuff, but also remember, it is writing. It is writing. So just remember the work that went into this with the classroom teacher in using their own skills to express themselves and giving them the space to express themselves. But I also want you to realize the trust that was given to their classroom teacher, Miss Blaché. Just remember the trust that was given to them, that they shared that with her. Will your students share with you? How will you make sure the space is of such that they will want to share that with you? And so when we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, when I speak to you specifically about culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, remember that powerful word I used in that class, and I said empowerment. And that is something I want us all to remember, that these poems that resonated with me today, this was one of the most powerful parts of the presentation, was that I kept saying, they are sharing their voices with you, with their teacher, because they got not just permission, but they knew that there was a level of care that they could share their voices. There was a level of respect that they could share their voices. The space was created, not just safe space. I want you to realize the kind of poem they wrote. I know that Dr. Blaché did not say, oh, this space is safe, but she would say this space is brave. That was a brave space created for them to share those things. So as we're doing this work in anti-discriminatory education, the one thing came up for me, another thing was the power of language. One of my biggest and most popular lecture is on deficit thinking in classroom. And then we move to strength-based approaches. Dr. Blaché, I talk to my students about the power of how we write report cards. As a young teacher myself, I remember writing so many report cards, and the language was not that positive because that's how we were taught to write report cards. So the power in language, how we speak to our students. When I use the word I see you, I get very emotional. I type a lot of hashtag I see you, even on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on social media. I think some people would be shocked and surprised the number of times I've typed the word, the hashtag I see you, and what I feel in my body. I have made a post, many posts on social media, and I put the hashtag I see you, and people on the other side of that post might not realize how much energy came out of my body. Sometimes I laugh, sometimes a tear comes down, because sometimes I'm responding to someone and I want them to know in an email, hashtag I see you. And it's deeper than just the visual. I'm seeing your pain, I'm seeing your emotions, I'm seeing your joy, I'm seeing your intention, I'm seeing your plan, your dreams. I am freedom dreaming with you, I am hugging you, I'm crying with you. And as educators, I want us to understand this is what the classroom needs. This is what the classroom needs. You know, as I said, 60% content, 20%, 40% other things, and those other things is the way you say good morning. I always say to my students, I can tell you tons of story of a student who was absent, and when they came back to my class, you thought they had gone on some big thing, because I am making sure they feel welcome. I said, I miss you, but I'm coming from a place, Serena, of learning how to say to students, well, why are you absent? You have missed this, you have missed that, you have missed this, you have missed that, you're missed. And they come back in class, and the first thing I'm thinking is, I say to them, well, I miss you. Welcome back. Glad to see you. That's the energy. That's the energy. And I know many of you are not there. And so it's a process of unlearning the ways in which we were taught to teach, or unlearning the ways you were taught as a student. I want you to be that teacher. I want you to be that teacher. I want you to be that teacher. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to ask Dr. Bruford, class, You can go. We're going to go into our personal class group work stuff, and then we wrap up. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Dr. Buford, good to see you again. Thank you, everybody else. See you on Thursday when we have our panel with 3 principals, 1 VP, who is talking about the work they are doing. And come with your question. Ask them how they are managing all this stuff in their schools. That's why they are here. And they are my people, and they are your people, and they are coming to share with community. I'm excited. Thank you for having the, for allowing me to be that person who you can engage with as your professor. Remember, I'm only an email away. I'm only a pepper message away. So connect with me. Enough love, enough love, enough love. We're going to stop the recording at this time. Enough love.